This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ship It. I am your host, Justin Garrison, and with me as always is Autumn Nash. How's it going, Autumn?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and even if you're teasing me for it being cold in Southern California, being 62 degrees.
It was 35 degrees and my car was iced over, and you're over here turning the heater up, Justin.
I did run my heater because if I don't have to wear a hoodie, I'm not going to. But it was like,
you work in tech. What are you having in hoodies?
they're fine, but if I can just be in a comfortable room.
This is how we know you're spoiled in California, because you're like, oh God forbid I put on a hoodie. We live in hoodies in Seattle. It is practically the state clothing item. If there was one, that's it.
I will say, I remember when I had an interview in Seattle, I was looking up weather and it snowed. This was years ago. And I was like, it's going to snow. I literally, the warmest thing I have is a hoodie. I went to Target that night, the night before I was flying up to this in-person interview 5 years ago or whatever. I had to go buy long underwear, some boots, and a jacket that was waterproof because I had nothing.
You actually dressed up for snow? You didn't just put on a hoodie and just run as fast as possible? Because that's the other funny thing. I feel like people somebody's always wearing shorts and a hoodie, and you look weather confused and it's cold outside, but whatever. Especially guys, I feel like there's people in shorts and I'm like, why? It is cold and rainy. Or nobody actually dresses for weather and they're just YOLO, we'll just walk as fast as possible, and I'm like, it's cold.
No, I am from Southern California and I will freeze to death in the snow.
I love that you really got long underwear and everything.
I did.
A day.
I have worn them 3 times now. I was just in Japan 2 weeks ago and it snowed there too. And so I had to bring them and I wore them.
I love your weather dramatics. It's so very California.
If it's under 40 Fahrenheit, I'm probably going to be bundling up. That's
Justin,
cool.
I was born in LA and I'm from Hawaii.
Yeah, whatever.
You were whatever, don't judge me.
You have moved to colder weather. You have migrated and I stayed here.
Send tacos.
Send tacos, yes. I have all the tacos stuff. On today's show, we have Chris Swan he's going to be talking about OpenSSF Scorecards, and we're going to get into the whole interview on what that is and what that means. And I'm really excited for everyone to hear about it because I learned quite a few different things about why it's important to have some sort of security metric for open source. And so it was a really fun conversation with Chris.
It was really interesting. And not just that, but Chris is the sweetest and he has the cutest dogs ever.
We did get to see his dogs.
Shout out to Chris's dogs because they're adorable.
To start off the show, as always, we're going to talk about a couple links that we found recently or in the last week that we thought you all might find interesting. And I'll go ahead and start with something that recently just happened for all of us. A leap year. Leap year happened. It's 2024, and we had an extra day in February. And so I found a list of leap day bugs, and it's always fun to find out how software breaks in unexpected ways when all of a sudden there's a new day of the month. And this list has quite a few different things, ranging from high impact to low impacts. And some of my favorite ones were around petrol stations in New Zealand stop working, or at least the self-service ones stop working. So I guess if you needed petrol or gas on that day, you couldn't get it, or you had to do something else, pay cash, right? The self-service, credit card machines, I think is what it was. The other one that was funny or interesting was in France, the lights turned off at midnight because there's just infrastructure that just disappeared because this day doesn't exist. So we're not on schedule. I don't know what to do.
It's just crazy because it's did we learn nothing from Y2K?
Y2K brings back so many memories. And I imagine a lot of people writing software on these systems now did not live through Y2K.
You made the best face. You were aw.
No, it made me feel so old because I just met someone recently and we were talking all sorts of stuff. And I was like, wait a minute. When were you born? And they said 2002. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
Dude, my brother and all his friends, oh my God, it's they were born in the 2000s. He's 20 And it just blows my mind. Like, how can you be that old and you were born in the 2000s? Like, I'm just like, how?
Yeah. And they don't remember the 1900s.
Don't say it like that. You made it sound so old, Justin. Why?
I think you just aged immediately when I said that.
Like, did you see? Like, I felt literal pain. I was like, why?
Like, my back hurts now. What happened?
I think I just aged 5 years. Thanks, Justin. I thought we were friends. Like, first the whole not drinking coffee thing, and now we're just like making me feel old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, my link is prescription orders delayed as U.S. pharmacies grapple with national state cyber attack. So some pharmacies, including CVS, weren't able to fulfill orders because of a cyber attack on Wednesday, February 21st. It was enterprise-wide connectivity issues that forced the system to stay down, which is just like wild because, you know, when you think of technology, we know that it's in everything, but you almost forget how much it is. Like, just between like thinking about your link and my link, like lights, pharmacies, like it is in like every part of our lives now. And then with AI, it's going to be in even more parts of our lives. People want to put it everywhere. And then it's like, but what are the impacts of that when something goes wrong? You know, people weren't able to get their prescriptions. And it's crazy because since COVID, like, I don't know if other people are having this problem, but like if you have a kid with ADHD, it's been so hard to get like regular ADHD meds because there's a shortage. So think about on top of that when like there's so many medicines that are like life threatening that you need, and you like with the laws, you know, you can only get so many days of them, and then you like have to get a new prescription or you have to do it where it's like very strictly timed. So can you imagine like if a cyber attack takes down like a pharmacy and you're on like your last day of like some life-saving medication or something that like is hard to get, you know, it could really affect people's lives. So,
and that's really interesting too, how like policy, because you don't want to avoid people abusing, right, you know, medicine and taking too much or whatever. But so you write policy that says, okay, you should be able to do this thing within this amount of time, and you don't understand how other things might be impacted. Because if this was the 1800s, right, we don't have cars, we have trains. And so it's like, okay, well, you probably need a couple months of this because the next train coming through, you may not be able to get a telegram over to them. And that technology directly impacts the policies we have in place for these sorts of things. And when the technology isn't up to snuff, if it fails or is hacked into it these ways, that policy kind of, all the assumptions around what is possible go out the window.
And it's wild. Like, I think we've been trying for a month and a half to get my kids ADHD medicine. I know a mom who went to 3 different pharmacies and couldn't find it. And then like, you know, on top of like that, if like they start going down, like how is that going to affect people that take like cancer meds or like diabetes meds, or, you know what I mean? Just crazy. It says that law enforcement this week dealt a heavy blow to Lockbelt ransom group, but there are still plenty of ransomware operators still earning millions of dollars. That's crazy. That's a business. You know what I mean? Like, that's like, you know, like you don't think of that. Like, it's not just some dude that took it down for fun. They're making like millions of dollars. That is wild.
If you've never read the book Spam Nation, it's a fantastic read about how the spam industry, mostly around drugs and prescriptions that aren't legitimate, because of these sorts of stresses of like, I need to get my meds, I have to survive on this thing, whether that's...
It makes me so sad that people are put in that situation, you know?
Absolutely. It's like the amount of stress that must involve. And then you get an email that says, hey, I can get you your meds for a discounted price. You don't need a doctor, right? Like all that other process and things that you have to go through. We could just skip all that. And like that boomed the spam in a lot of ways, like not the food, the email.
Not just that, but it makes me sad because how many older people they say that people are eating like, you know, like, or not eating or eating. Like, I think there was a documentary, people were eating like cat food because they were like saying that their meds were so expensive and people were trying to get it from Canada and from other countries and places. And then it's like, think about like the fact that if you like had an email like that, you're going to be like, oh my God, I can afford something more this week, you know? And that's like so sad because there's already so many robocalls that take like advantage of older people. And then you add that into it. And it's just like, why are we putting like humans in this position to even be that desperate, you know?
Yeah, the fixed income for a lot of people is a super, like, you have to know exactly where every dollar's going and what you can and can't afford. And
I remember when I was pregnant with my son, I was so sick. And there was a medicine. It was the only like FDA medicine approved for like morning sickness that wouldn't cause like a miscarriage. And it was $700. but it was literally B6 and Unison, which is like you could mix it at Target for like $12, and it was $700. And they like, it took 3 weeks, like 3 weeks of me not being able to hold down water for insurance to approve it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, some dude in the office is just turning this down while I'm like so sick, you know? It was just like, it blew my mind, the whole process of like insurance and stuff.
Now I'm sad.
It is sad. I don't want old people not taking their medicine, worrying about like food, and just like, I hope that we do take this kind of stuff into consideration.
And I do find, like, there was just recently, I didn't put it as a link here this week, but the White House is like, we need to write memory safe languages, right? Like, they want people to write Rust.
I thought that was so interesting that like actually like the White House was getting into like software in that way. And I thought that was like really cool, because, which is also kind of like crazy, because I feel like a lot of government entities have like really old languages and like software. So I thought that was interesting too. But
of everyone telling me what software to write or what language to pick, I would not expect it to be
exactly the people that still use COBOL.
Like, you know what? Yeah, like maybe this old language isn't, like, this Fortran is kind of long in the tooth. Let's just like leap everything else and say, what should we do? And yeah, like memory safe languages, like maybe it can protect against certain things, right? But it's not going to protect everything. But it's like, hey, if this protects anything like this that could affect millions of people, then yeah, it's worth it to, you know, pay developers to learn this software, like this language, this infrastructure, whatever it is, because that does have huge impacts in something like a government where everyone depends on it.
Well, just like if you're going to build like military applications or like government applications, it is better for it to be like more stable. And like on, you know, I'm glad that they're taking those things into consideration and they're wanting to build them better, because it's, I know just like being married to someone in the military for so long, they were talking about taking a lot of the processes like for moving and like that type of thing and trying to make apps for them. So it's interesting because as like the military and different aspects of the government do become more technical, they're going to have to update their tech, because now they're starting new like technical applications on top of like the older tech that they've been managing. So it's interesting how like those things are going to like, I wonder if that law will affect like how they build applications for like actual like military families, and, you know, on top of the building it for ships and, you know, tanks, etc.
Cool. Well, let's jump into the interview with Chris and talk all about security for open source, because that kind of ties into some of this as well. It's like, hey, are you following best practices to secure your repos? And can we trust this code in any way? And OpenSSF Scorecards is one way to kind of see maybe a proxy of that, of like, maybe I do trust this, or maybe there's some bad situations or just something that doesn't add up here that isn't secure. So let's jump into the interview and we'll talk to you after.
Well, friends, I have some good news for you. It is launch week once again for Sentry, and I'm here with Rahul Chabria from the product team at Sentry. So, Rahul, what can you tell me about the launch week this year for Sentry?
In March, we're making a huge investment into our product platform. We're trying to make it faster, better. In November, we shared a sneak peek about our new metrics offering. So now developers will be able to define custom metrics they care about and monitor how quickly their app is responding to the business measures they have to be accountable for, plus also like the customer experiences that they've committed to. And that's going to be available in an alpha. People can sign up to get access. We'll turn it on for them like within a couple of days once they write in, and they can get going right away. Now, on top of that, it's like we are looking more at how do we make the product smarter. Now, I know the world is talking about AI and ML, and they're all solving like, we think like entertaining problems, but Sentry's taking a more thoughtful approach to it. We are trying to look at what is the developer trying to do? Like, our goal is not to have you sit in Sentry all day long. Our goal is not have us like be a tab that you need to keep open. Our goal is to have this be a tab you open when something is wrong, give you the information you need right away, tell you how impactful it is to your user base, and if you should care. And if it is something you should care about, here's how to fix it. So we're taking a broader look at how developers use the product. Where's the noise they're seeing? Like, are they seeing repeat events? Are they seeing like things that are not critical rise to the top and have to automatically resolve them or ignore them? So we're going to make Sentry a little bit smarter with artificial intelligence to give you a more prioritized view of the issues that really matter so you can solve them quickly and move on and not be distracted by random rage clicks that are, just ghost issues. Those are the two major things coming out. It's like thinking about more like defining the metrics you care about, also figuring out ways to like organize your issues so developers can actually solve those problems faster. And then we're also working on a few features for our mobile developers. Like Sentry is a platform that works with any technology you want. But for mobile developers, there's always been this like, wait a second, there was an error, but hold on, let me go dig up this device and see if I can recreate it. I can't recreate it. Okay, let me go look at the stack trace. I'm like, it's definitely something there. I'll just fix it and push a release. And hopefully those now like the crash rates go up and the crash for user rates go up. But it's always like this idea of like, I still need to figure out like, where's that bank of used old devices for someone running, iOS 13 on an iPhone 11 somewhere. So we're giving them the ability, we're previewing the ability for mobile developers to actually see what happens on an end user session. So that way there's no question about the problem or the latency issue, and building out more performance capabilities so they can see exactly how fast their app is performing. Those are the three big things we're planning on talking about, aside from core platform announcements, some integrations and cool partnerships we're working with. Yes, the big investment in machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Okay, Sentry's launch week happens March 18th through the 22nd. Check the show notes for a link to the launch week page. I'll be showing off new features, products. You can tune into their YouTube channel or Discord daily at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to hear the latest scoop. Or if you want to get swag along the way, enter your email address at the page. We'll link up to get swag all along the way. Or join the Discord. Whatever works for you. Head to sentry.io. That's sentry.io. I'm sure they'll link it up somewhere. Or check the show notes for a link. While you're at it, use the code CHANGELOG to get $100 off the team plan. Again, use the code CHANGELOG. Go to sentry.io.
All right, thank you so much, Chris Swan, for being on the show today to talk all about OpenSSF Scorecards. And Chris, tell us about yourself. Where do you work and what do you do?
So hi, I'm Chris Swan. I'm an engineer at AtSign, where we're building a platform for next generation networking based on personal data services. And one of my focuses there is on how we show that we care about security. And that's why we ended up implementing scorecards, which I guess is what we're here to talk about.
The way you phrase that makes me how we show that we're interested in security or care about security, like immediately in my head thinks of security theater, where, hey, there's a thing that we have to do for a checklist that doesn't really matter, but I know that's different than what you're actually working on. So let's start with, what is OpenSSF?
OpenSSF is the open source security foundation. It's a thing inside of Linux Foundation, so sort of sits alongside of CNCF as one of the projects there.
So it's its own foundation, and what does it focus on? What's the purpose of a new foundation that is open security?
So it focuses on securing the supply chain. It seems to have had a lot of initial energy, at least from Google. So we first kind of came across Scorecard when Dart and Flutter implemented scorecards on their GitHub repos, and they did a blog post about why they'd done that. And we saw that and thought, yeah, that's them showing us that they care about security in a very sort of visual way. And we immediately thought, this is a good way for us to communicate to our customers that we care about security.
So what exactly is a scorecard then? Like, is that a report card on my Git commits? Is this a badge that I put in my banner of my README? What is it?
So it is ultimately a badge that you put in the banner of the README, and it has a sort of colored element to it. So as the score gets better, it goes from sort of red to yellow to shades of green. So once you get a score of 8 or better, it's a nice bright green scorecard. If you click on the badge, that'll take you to the most recent output file from the scorecard action running. And so what's happening there is it's implemented as a GitHub action. Every time there's a merge to trunk, that action is going to run. And it's checking against a whole bunch of sort of different areas of security. So do you have known vulnerabilities? Are you pinning your dependencies? Branches protected in your GitHub config? Do you do static source code analysis? Do you do dynamic source code analysis? Have you completed the OpenSSF best practices questionnaire? to a passing grade or silver or gold. And so it's measuring each of those dimensions and then adding all of that together into a score out of 10.
You know, it's really interesting. I was reading this article and it said gamifying like parts of like your development process, like pipelines or different ways of like writing good code and showing developers that they write good code and that they've done something. Like, I don't know if it's all because we love video games, but it's proven to help people to like, if you gamify like your metrics, like what colors or just anything like that, they've proven that people will write better code, So it's like super interesting that I wonder if the way that the scorecards have that, the little buy-in to make you want to get, that extra 5%, then 5 more percent,
Yeah, it certainly does do that. And, once we started putting all of our scorecards together on a table, then it made me want to make sure that they were all at least green. But then that gets you into the whole, it's about 20% of the effort to get 80% of the score. So it's, relatively easy to get an 8. To get from an 8 to like a 9 is a ton more effort. So, it's a sort of Pareto thing of 80-20, 20% of the effort to get 80% of the score, but then it's all uphill from there because you're then putting in the other 80% of the effort to get the residual 20% of the score. And it's a bit sort of law of diminishing returns at some point there.
But honestly, if people were 80% like more secure on a bunch of Git repos, especially with open source, because so many people are like, then inheriting your either good or bad, you know what I mean? So I think like, even if everybody was at 80% and just the getting it green motivated people that way, like security is so optional all the time until something goes wrong. So I still think that would be like amazing,
It would. And there was a paper out a couple of months back where they looked at sort of the top 20 open source projects by popularity and ran scorecard against them. So I think basically none of them had a scorecard in the repo, but anybody can run the tool against any repo.
Oh, that's interesting, because if you were going to build something and you want it to look at, hey, is this secure enough for me to, build my application on top of it or build it into my application? And then the fact that you can apply a scorecard to another repo, that's actually really interesting. That'd be like a really good way to pick like what open source projects you'd want to like incorporate into something that you're building,
It is. I think if you're able to choose between, let's say, TLS implementations, then you might very well decide, this is the TLS implementation I'm going to go for because I can see that the people building this have done the things that show that they care about security, as opposed to, another one where, maybe that level of diligence isn't so transparent.
And by making this a number or a color, I'm red green colorblind, so those probably wouldn't matter to me as much. But like seeing a number of like you got an 8 out of 10, it kind of boils down all the complexity of, hey, like, are you doing the best practices things? Are you doing the things that we know you should just have this in place? Like you mentioned, protecting your main branch or something, things that are like, hey, we're going to probably avoid some of the obvious errors in how this software gets built and maintained and distributed by just doing these handful of things and give you that relatively good number. If it's like a 6 or a 7, you're probably still in the yellows, but at that point you're still like, oh, like they're doing something right. It's not just like a default open GitHub repo.
Yeah. And I think where people are implementing it, you never see a red badge. As soon as somebody's kind of made the commitment to put a scorecard on their repo, they've probably also made the commitment to try and make that score at least decent. So generally you're seeing sort of yellow and better scorecards with scores of sort of 6.5 or better. I've not seen anybody sort of publicly putting a scorecard on something where it's it's in an awful shape, but we're going to get better maybe later on.
Could be a good deterrent. You're just like, you know what? This is an experiment. Don't use this yet. It is red.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's kind of cool because when you're scoping projects and you're looking for tools to use, that would be like a great research tool.
And you mentioned you could run the tool on any repo. It's a command line tool. It runs in a GitHub action. What sort of permission does it need on the repo itself? Because you said it will look for things like protected main branch. Like, is that something it's calling the GitHub API for, or is it looking somewhere else for that if you're just running this on a bunch of random repos?
So it is making use of the GitHub API, and for open source repos, you can actually see that stuff. So you can see aspects of the GitHub config, even though to change that config, you would need to be an administrator.
Right. You have read-only access, and that's what the scorecard needs.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier that you started seeing it on Flutter repos. Is that where it's mainly being used, or where are you actually seeing it being implemented in different projects and groups?
The energy seemed to have originated from Google, but I think it's already spread out quite widely from there. So, for instance, Intel have now got a very mature open source organization. The leader there, that's Arun Gupta. He's now the chair of OpenSSF. But Arun's somebody that's kind of moved around the industry, doing roles in Amazon and Apple and now Intel, and so is recognizable industry figure. And for him to kind of take over as figurehead of OpenSSF shows that Intel's got that commitment to security. But behind Arun, the team at Intel are kind of busily working their way through thousands of open source repos that they've got implementing Scorecard. That's just an example of a large organization with a big open source presence deciding to adopt it and committing themselves to the process of A, implementing it, and then B, kind of turning the ratchet to make the scores get better, and working with their internal teams to change some of the tooling and culture that actually lies behind achieving those scores.
Are scorecards versioned at all? It's just a kind of question of like, hey, today you're a green badge, you're an 8. Things change over time and practices change. And in 2 to 3 years from now, I'm assuming what got you an 8 today is not going to get you an 8 in 2027. So do they version that at all? Is there a way to like notice like, oh, which spec are you applying to? Because this is all to give me some assurances that you're doing the right thing, but that maintenance does take time.
So being an open source project itself, Scorecard is constantly improving. And one of the side effects of that is your 8 today is not guaranteed to be an 8 tomorrow, because the things that are being measured may move under your feet. So new things might be introduced. Hopefully it means that more people are kind of able to access it. So let's say it's measuring static source code analysis tools. Of course, all of the popular open source analysis tools are already there, but there's going to be a bunch of other tools that people have embraced and maybe that apply to languages and frameworks that aren't quite so mainstream. And so people are going to have the opportunity to add those in, and that shouldn't really affect the score of everybody else. Whereas there's other cases of sort of new areas of concern being brought in, and that's kind of adding to the denominator. Everybody now has got a total score that's being divided by something to get it to a score out of 10, and the divisor just got bigger because there's more things being measured. That's challenging us all, I think, to be continuously improving our security posture and being diligent to keep on top of that stuff.
I think that's really cool because I think people only think about security when something goes wrong, and the fact that like more and more people are, I feel like, championing open source, but like maybe it is harder when people are all working for different companies and working for, trying to like beginning people trying to learn how to like contribute to open source. And you've got people from all over the world, and it kind of gives you like a nice measurement for everybody to kind of look over into like a goal to meet for security,
It does. And I think it introduces a new set of norms about how projects are expected to work. So if we look at contributing to open source, it can be a very uneven process at the moment. Every different open source project has got a different set of customs, a different approach to doing continuous integration, different standards around what they expect to see in commit messages and that sort of thing. And I think one of the things that Scorecard will hopefully achieve here is, as more and more people are adopting Scorecard, it'll level things out a little bit in terms of common approaches are typically going to be needed to achieve good scores. So then as you're moving from one open source project to another, you'll find that they're doing things in similar ways, and it's kind of less of a learning curve to continue that open source contribution journey.
That's a really good perspective.
I do want to give a little bit of idea here for like people that like, what is the CLI? I literally just downloaded and installed the CLI and ran it against, I have a bash scheduler for Kubernetes. Like it's written in bash. It's like 100 lines of bash. And I ran it. I'm like, what is my score for this thing that I've never touched the repo on? And it never tried to make it secure. And it doesn't even have releases, all that stuff. And I got a 2.8 out of 10. So that'd be a red badge for sure. And this would be good. Like, I do not run this in production. Like, this is not a thing that you should ever be trying. But it's interesting seeing almost every one of my scores is either a question mark, a 0 out of 10, or a 10 out of 10. Like, I have nothing in the middle. Nothing of like, oh, well, like you're okay on this, which is kind of interesting, where it's like, I have 0 vulnerabilities. I got a 10 out of 10. There's no vulnerabilities in my bash code. No known vulnerabilities in my bash code. And that's kind of amazing right there when I think about it. But in like contributors is another one, which is an interesting thought for how does something become secure with contributors. And in this case, in just the CLI output, it says there's how many different organizations have contributed to this repo. And my bash repo has 4 different organizations found. 4 different people have contributed to the tool. So it's like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Like for what this is, like it's not one company, it's not one org, it's 4 different people have actually committed code to this. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, some of the checks are really binary. You either pass them or fail them, but others are very much more on some kind of spectrum. So one of the checks is OpenSSF best practices, and you might see it there as CII best practices, which is this huge questionnaire which feels to me like it's somewhat aligned with something like the NIST cybersecurity framework. So there's lots and lots and lots of stuff in there, including the kind of, run over by a bus problem of, have you only got one maintainer for this thing, or have you got a bunch of people that can step in to look after it? The score for that is, kind of 5 if you get passing, and then I think 7 if you get to silver, and then 10 if you get to gold.
And 0 if you haven't tried anything.
And 0 if you haven't even started. But I think you can get a 3 for being in progress. So if you've completed a bunch of the questionnaire, you're not passing yet, but at least you're trying to get there.
It's interesting here seeing just like, what is it? Because like I don't have a license file in this repo, which I should. I generally put license files, but I don't have a license file, so it's a 0. Fuzzing 0, maintained 0. But I also have no packaging. There's no binary, so I have no binary artifacts, which is a 10. I was like, hey, cool, you don't have any binary, so this is a good thing because we can see all the code available in the repo. So it's interesting, yeah, because you could. I don't want to say you could game this, but I could not run this on certain things to make sure like, you know what? Like, I don't want to have to deal with that right now. I mean, just like you were saying, to get the 8 score, like I could pick and choose the things that are going to get me a better average to get me to that 8 point of saying like, hey, this has, again, those best practices. These are the things that as of today in 2024, this is a good idea for you to have. And let's make sure that you have those things in place, and we'll give you a decent enough score so people can trust that you're at least doing the basics.
So gaming's an interesting aspect to this. So, one challenge for us was our docs repos. How do you do CI against a docs repo? What sort of testing should you be doing there? And you have to be a little bit creative with this. So what we've ended up doing in that particular case is we have a markdown linter as one of the CI checks. Initially, I kind of felt a little icky about it because it's like, oh, I'm just putting that in there to make sure that we've got something that's checking the box so that we can get our nice green badge. But actually, it's ended up changing the culture of the organization around how we use Markdown. And people are starting to lint their Markdown even in the repos where we've not done that, because it's become the norm to lint Markdown. And actually, the Markdown's all really nice now and really consistent rather than as it was before.
I also really think that maybe this could be a gateway into contributing to open source, because when you first start wanting to contribute to open source, you're like, well, what do I even contribute? Like, how do I even? And the fact that, something as simple as like fixing docs or, linting stuff, or, maybe if there are like low hanging things that you could do and contribute to make the scorecard better, could be somebody's first couple contributions, because it helps you figure out where to implement these things. And then you can go and figure out how to do that, So there's like a lot of debate about like how to get into open source right now and how to do your first contribution. So maybe Scorecard gives not only the best practices that we start to learn, but also is a new way for the next generation of people that want to contribute to open source. And then they can start that journey with best practices.
Yeah. And I always encourage people to start with documentation PRs. And I think it's so frequently the case that the creator of a project, and especially sort of small projects, it worked on their environment and they've tried to document it as they think somebody needs to for using it. But you come along and try and use it. Let's say it's a Ruby project. You find that there's a whole bunch of gems that you need that they had on their laptop, but that weren't actually documented. And so you can then make a contribution to the README to say, dependencies, you actually need to install these gems and then it's going to work. And that's going to be really useful for the next person coming along wanting to use that thing.
That's such a good thought too, because how many times have you tried a project or done something and then it doesn't work the way that you think it is? And it's like so frustrating. But that's really an opportunity to, for one, make better software for the next person, but also be that contribution to open source. So that's a really good perspective.
Yeah, we've done Hacktoberfest for the last few years, and it was a bit different this past year because of them not giving away T-shirts anymore. I saw less activity as a result of that.
I didn't know they'd stop the T-shirts.
Yeah, I know it was kind of positioned as being a sustainability thing, that they didn't want to be using all the cotton and mailing them T-shirts all over the world. But yeah, I did like the T-shirts. Even though they gave people options previously to have a tree planted or whatever, instead, I chose the T-shirt. But past years, I've been entirely happy with people coming along with typo corrections on READMEs and stuff like that to score a commit for their Hacktoberfest. That's absolutely fair game. And I think there's a little bit of gatekeeping sometimes happens around that of, it's not a serious contribution. But it's like, even if you're putting a full stop in the right place to correct something, it's good enough for me.
I feel like docs do not get enough. Like, having good documentation is so underrated, and it helps people to use your product. Like, you can have the best product ever, but if it's hard to use, people aren't going to use it, So I feel like people should appreciate people that write good documentation and add to documentation, because like you said, like, people have been, usually when you're building something, you've been using that technology for a while, or you're so deep in it that you can't see what you need or what, like how to explain it. And having a new person come behind you or a new engineer on your team try to use something is so important, because it's so easy to assume knowledge,
It's a context, right? It is that, like, how much do I need to know ahead of learning this? And there's a lot of assumptions in various language programming and stuff like that. It's just like, well, you're learning Ruby on Rails, so you must know Ruby, right? And it's like, well, like, maybe I'm a beginner. And you have to balance that, like, how much do I need to teach someone from scratch and how much can I just assume that they know? And it's like, there's a lot of times, like, I've helped people that were getting into tech and they're like, I don't know what the command line is. I don't know where I'm typing and what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, well, let's start at the very basics of, like, what is a command line, and not assume what even a command and output and exit codes are. And, like, that's just a different way of, like, okay, but we don't need to put that necessarily in the docs for everyone, because then it just becomes very much like, okay, well, a long time ago we made computers, right? Like, we made a processor, and like this, like, let's figure out, like, how much context is relevant to what we're trying to do, and where are people starting, and trying to bring people into that. And so I do think that it's interesting taking this scorecard approach of, how do we get someone to contribute to a open source, especially from cybersecurity? Because cybersecurity, people trying to get into cybersecurity or do more just like learning around what cybersecurity is, get in the industry, is not generally an open source friendly community.
And every job is like, you need 3 years of experience, but how?
Exactly. And being able to give them this starting point of, here's some things that are generally best practices, and we say you have to have or should have these things, like pin dependency. Even if they don't know, why do I need a pin dependency? Like, how does that help with security? Doesn't actually matter right here.
But also, that's a jumping point for someone to go down that rabbit hole and go learn about stuff. Oh, this thing is, I can fix this. Now let me go figure out what it is, and then Google it, and then learn about it. And then when they fix it, you're going to remember that more than if you just Googled something and just had to read it in a textbook, because your brain had to go search that, then you had to go fix it, then you had to learn about it. You know what I mean? So that's just, it's so much better of a learning opportunity.
Yeah, and giving someone new a place to start with how to do something, not why, sometimes is important, because you just need to I just need to try it first. I need to do something, and then I can go back and figure out oh, why did I do that? What was that relevant to? Why did that matter?
Also, it gains confidence. I think a lot of times in tech, you spend all this time researching and doing theory and learning in classes, but the actual I think people, especially women, already have imposter syndrome, And I feel like when you get to actually go and solve a problem and do things, it helps you to be more confident when you get a job or you're in that meeting or to have an opinion. So I think getting the chance to build those small wins, even for yourself, helps you to be in this industry,
Chris, you were mentioning early on that OpenSSF is about securing the supply chain of software. And how does this specifically, how do scorecards tie into that? Why is this an important piece of a supply chain? Because supply chains are generally hashes built on hashes that are secure to no, I can go back to the point of commit, or whatever code I'm running was authored and made sure that that's the actual thing I'm running is the thing that they committed. How does this tie into that?
It's a piece to the puzzle. And if you go and take a look at OpenSSF, then there's a whole bunch of other projects there which are related to how we have things flowing through the software supply chain and how we can attest to the security of them and measure that. So things like software bill of materials and signing artifacts and stuff like that come into play with some of the other projects. But when we look at the scorecard itself, I think it kind of directly relates to it in two ways. So we were just talking about dependency pinning. That's one of the things that it's pushing you to do. That's pinning against shards, not just against semvers. So you're absolutely stating that this is intended to work with that particular version of a dependency. The problem with that is it creates a whole bunch of toil. So dependencies are changing under our feet at a frightening pace. Something like Python cryptography, I think I've seen 4 bumps to that in the last week or so. And it's followed a pattern of, so there's been 2 CVEs where it's become a known vulnerability to be stuck on the old version because there's been buffer overflows or whatever. But then there's been a sort of follow-up patch of, oh yeah, that security fix broke something else for a whole bunch of corner cases that our tests weren't covering before now, but people complained and we figured out what was going wrong. And so there's another patch. We've now fixed the tests as well. So this stuff can be fast moving, and staying on top of it is a bunch of work. The other way it kind of relates to the supply chain is what Autumn was talking about earlier. It's as you're choosing things that you're going to depend on, if you're seeing the scorecard there, then that's giving you a measure of the quality of attention being paid to security in that project. And so if you do have a choice, and quite often when we're picking packages, there may be very little choice. You find the one package that does the thing and everybody's depending on that. But other cases, you do have a choice, and that might be one of the things that leans you one way or the other.
You mentioned a couple of things there on this being a piece of the puzzle, where looking at this test output, I don't see anything about signed artifacts, and I don't see anything about some of those other things that are more downstream, because this is focused strictly on the repository, how's the repository managed and how the code is managed, not necessarily how we're distributing artifacts, right? So there's different tooling and different ways that we should be verifying that outside of what the scorecard's going to do.
So signed artifacts is absolutely one of the checks. And there's a little tool that got published in the last week or so from one of the Linux Foundation folk, where you can point it at your scorecard and it'll show you a radar plot of the different scores and where they came from. And so signed artifacts is in there. That's one of the places that our repos are sort of zeros at the moment, because most of them were not signing artifacts. And we're not doing that because in many cases, there's not actually a mature signed artifact consumption mechanism on the other side of that to actually make it worthwhile doing for a consumer perspective of the artifact. So things like Python artifact signing is actually at the maturity where it's worth doing and somebody might actually be implementing, checking the signatures. But something like Dart, that's less of a thing in that ecosystem at the moment, so not quite as relevant. Yeah, if we kind of look at both sides of it here, is are you looking at the dependencies coming in and the quality of those, and are you looking at what you're creating and how that might be somebody else's dependency, and the level of assurance that you can pass into that next link in the chain?
And I probably don't have any sort of signing in my output because I have no artifacts. I'm guessing too, like there's, we can skip over some of those tests if we're not actually consuming, or it's like, you know what, like let's not run that.
I also think that's interesting though, because, especially when they always say that like startups and innovations and new things are built when tech is in a downturn, right? And I wonder if like things like this, where we're talking about best practices and how you said there's no mature tool on the other side, I wonder if that also starts like innovation, like, hey, like people notice like we don't have something for this, let's go build it, or like if that kind of influences that kind of like when we see holes for like use cases and problems, and then we go make solutions for them,
There's so much happening in that space at the moment, and it all to an extent flows from an executive order. And I know there was many years of work done by some dedicated practitioners in the security space to get to the executive order in the first place. But now there's an executive order mandating federal agencies to get a software bill of materials with the software that they're acquiring. The purpose of that is really to draw attention to known vulnerabilities in software that's being acquired by the federal government. But of course, the people doing the supplying here are having to step up and create the mechanics to create those software bills of material. And then there's also a whole bunch of tooling arriving so that you can look into your software bill of material and see what are the known vulnerabilities. And maybe there weren't any yesterday, but there could be today. So, your vulnerability feeds being run against your sort of already known stuff in your environment. And I think sophisticated organizations are already starting to implement processes and tools around consuming that stuff, but it is so early days. So for the bulk of the industry, it's going to be years before this is commonplace, but it will come. And there's a whole bunch of work to be done to make it happen across the huge variety of programming languages and infrastructure and frameworks and whatever else we've got out there.
I think what you were mentioning before too, where this isn't all positive things necessarily. Like this does add more toil. This does add more things that you have to maintain, and you shouldn't jump into that toil until you need it or are required to have it sometimes, where it's like, hey, if I'm going to pin all of my dependencies and now I have 10 more PRs a day or a week from my dependencies all shifting and changing, and I need to update and test those things, I can't actually build new things into my product. I'm just going to be maintaining it and maintaining the scorecard forever. Knowing when and how you should adopt those things is important. And the federal government having the bill of materials and knowing where their software comes is a very good example of, what, I would love for some of my tax dollars to go into them knowing what they're running. And that's okay for me to say, like, actually that toil is necessary and a good improvement on knowing at least the fact of like known vulnerabilities and the places they're getting their software will meet some minimum bar of, they're not running bash scheduler in their Kubernetes clusters. I sure hope not. I have no scorecard. And those sorts of things is really important to know how it's being consumed and where it's actually important. But yeah, for something like my personal repos, where I was like, actually, I don't think I want to pin this because I'm okay if it breaks, and I don't have an SLA, and I'm not getting paid for, this code. It's just me to experiment and learn and put something out there to share. That is okay to not have a scorecard.
See, I think I'm almost the opposite. I'm like, I want to put this on everything so then I can like learn all, like, just like, I love reading about security and postmortems, but then now I'm just like, I can actually figure out how all these things work in context. Like when you get to work in software, you work in like your realm of software and you don't always get exposed to other things. So it's so fun, like finding ways to expose yourself to like ways that other people are using this to actually build things, but like on a level where you can play with it on the weekends and at night. You know what I mean? So I think this is almost like fun because I can go implement that and be like, oh, that's what this does in real life, like more than just reading about it in a book.
I have been archiving a whole bunch of my repos because I just got sick of the maintenance. And I think it becomes one of those things of you have to be conscious about these are the active projects and I'm actually going to keep on going with the toil on them. And these are the ones where it was interesting at a point in time, but I'm ready to move on from that particular experiment. And when you archive the repo, of course, it's still there, but it's kind of just setting the flag as if to say, no longer active. Don't expect all of this to be up to date.
It closes issues. It closes all that. Yeah. It's just like, hey, you know what? Like, if you really like this, you're welcome to the thing that I created. I'm reading the book, Working in Public right now. I'm almost through with it. And one of the things that they point out in there, which I find really fascinating, is that software in general, like, it doesn't take me more money to make an extra copy for it. Like, anyone can go consume the code without needing to do anything. No bits are coming from my brain for them to like be able to consume that. But what does cost me money is my attention. And when they leave comments or issues or pull requests, and especially if those things aren't necessarily meeting a certain standard of like formatting, or right, like they didn't format the code or they didn't give me the logs or something, like that takes more for me to reproduce. And then my attention is a finite amount of thing that exists that's kind of attached to that code in some way, where it's like, I learned this years ago, but it's not something that I can keep giving attention to because I can't keep giving attention to the toys that I bought when I was 5 years old. Like sometimes I have to like give those things away at a garage sale. And at some point, like my code is going through the same stages where it's like, you know what, like I played with that enough. I learned enough from it. Now I need someone else if they want it. I can't give any more attention to it. And I find that really fascinating how they point that out in the book about just like, hey, like this is the expensive thing in these code repos and how they exist, because software, the bits we can replicate over and over again without costing anything. But once you start pulling attention from the maintainers or from the people who write it or do anything around the project, that attention is finite for people. And you have to really guard that.
It's also part of like the culture of software though, because we're always like, this is the only job that you do your job for fun on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like it's just like expected that you build projects all weekend, and like, that like you're constantly like, how many people have bought domains, created things, and it's like at some point, like, where do you get that work-life balance, or just kind of like when do you decide that you're done with that project, or?
But I mean, and it's not just software though, right? Because like I thought I was gonna be a mechanic my entire life. I love cars. I was working on cars, and I would work on cars on the weekend, right? Like I would go, like I'd get paid to work on cars, and then I'd go home and I'd work on cars, and that's what I liked doing. But I wasn't publicly visible to people. That was like, I'm just spending time in my garage, and that's okay because it is still my guarded area of like, you know what, like I don't have to answer questions to someone else. In the book also they point out like Christmas lights for in the United States, like it's a big thing. Like you decorate the outside of your house for a holiday, which is weird to kind of do because you're just like showing off. Like at some point, like, oh, maybe this is a competition. I don't know. But like someone can drive by my house and they can look at my Christmas lights. And that's okay. Like that's
some
what I want.
People definitely make it a competition. Some people,
you absolutely like. You can go. There's lots of negatives and consumerism in that, but also for like me to like, I like how my house looks when it's decorated, and I'm gonna spend a day or half a day decorating my house, and then anyone that drives by, it's free for them to look at. They can come. I want them to come drive by and see the cool thing that I created out of my creativity and budget and whatever in my time. But at the end of the day, like if they want me to make changes to it, like no one's knocking on my door and saying like, hey, can you get the bigger snowman next time? Or can you like move this light? Cause I don't like how that looks. Like, but that's how software works, right? Like in open source, like I put something out there and someone's like, actually like this flag is bad. Can you go change that for me? Like, no, like this is mine, right? Like I decorated this, I built it, and I don't really care like to take outside contributions right now. But there is this like assumption in open source that you can just go and do that because you're just like, well, it's open source. I'm going to go add an issue and say like, please change this output to be something different to fit my needs. I'm like, no, go fork it and do it yourself. Like, well, no, that's maintenance for them. And they don't want the maintenance, right? But my house, no one has ever knocked on my door to say, please change your lights. and it's just like a different mindset of how we treat open source. And in this case, like a scorecard gives them the visibility that like, I care about this thing. I'm going to do enough to provide this information to you of here's the basics. And we do care about this. We're going to try to improve it, or at least maintain this number. We don't ever want probably to drop. But it does open it up enough for someone getting started to say, hey, I actually want to contribute in this. I want to learn in this area. Would it be okay if I increased your score in these areas? Or even just giving them a way to measure themselves against someone else, right? Like, oh, that other repo has an 8. What would it take me to get to an 8? I don't know. Like, let's go look at that. And it does give you that comparison as well to know like just a baseline of, I mean, like grades at school are the same way, right? Like it's like, oh, I have straight B's. Is that good? I don't know. It's how many letters in the alphabet? Like, is this out of 26 letters? I don't know. It's actually, it's just 5 letters. We're good. Just try to get the A's next time. And this just gives you that sort of comparison level to let you try to improve and to know where you're not doing necessarily the best practices or need some help.
I think it's also like, it just is such a cool learning opportunity and a way for new people to get in that, like, it's so cool that you're solving multiple problems. You're solving the problem of better security and giving like that visibility and credit to motivate people to have better security. But you're also kind of allowing an in for new people in this world that has a lot of gatekeeping. So it's really cool that you're solving multiple problems with one thing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'd throw in here is, as I've come to know some people in OpenSSF and the community around it, they're just super helpful, lovely folk that are really interested in raising all the ships. So I think there's some parts of communities get a bad rap, but most of the ones that I've personally encountered have been fantastic. So we were talking a little about Flutter earlier. The Flutter community is just lovely. So far, my encounters with OpenSSF have been amazing. So, nice people doing good work.
So if someone wants to get involved, where do they start?
I would suggest start at openssf.org. Then they can see Scorecard as one of the projects there, and that'll take them into the Scorecard mini site. And that's kind of got a guide on how to implement it, whether you want to do sort of standalone with the command line tool or go to the GitHub action and make it an ongoing part of your repo.
How do you get involved with OpenSSF and like the foundation? Because it sounds really cool.
So there's, I suppose, 2 different ways there. So one is formally becoming a member of OpenSSF. And, that works like so many of the other Linux Foundation projects. So it's a very organizational approach. And if your organization's already a member of Linux Foundation, then there's a different price structure to if you're just going in to join the OpenSSF. That doesn't seem to be an individual membership approach at the moment. But that brings me into the sort of second area of it doesn't really matter because it's a very open and welcoming community. So if you've got issues or PRs or other ways of contributing, the repos are there and you can go along and do that. They don't seem to be gatekeeping activities around OpenSSF to just people who work for organizations that are OpenSSF members. So I'm getting involved next week in a webinar. It's not next week, week after, that OpenSSF are doing about the topic of Scorecard. And it's a combination of customers of Scorecard like us, and then some of the people who've created and maintained it.
Cool. And if people want to reach out to you online, where are you available?
So I can be found at chris.swans.net, and that's kind of got links to all of my social media and LinkedIn and GitHub and all of that kind of stuff. And so, I'm pretty easy to then kind of find a route through to. And of course, in amongst that, I've done a few presentations about Scorecard. It's very much focused on a practitioner's approach. What does it take to build the foundations within your organization, to do your first repo, and then to repeat that process across the other repos that you want to put scorecards onto.
Yeah, I could see this at a large enterprise or company being very political. I could see, because there's a lot of security tools. There's a lot of people that want to focus on security, and there's a lot of people that have strong opinions about security implementations. And I could see this as a starting point of, if you don't have good security practices, like, hey, we should try this because it's open and it's free for us to get started. Free as in there's no buy-in to use the tool, but not free as in it does take time. And being able to show off within your organization how that could work, but also like maybe even pushing back on some of the more closed vendors that don't provide anything like this, of like, you trust our tool to do all the scanning, and we give you a green checkbox inside of our dashboard, which isn't publicly available or shareable. And I've used plenty of security tools in the past that are very closed about and guarded about their secrets of how they score things and how you can improve those things, and not being able to share those things. And so I could see this as being an open approach of like, this information should be available to more people, and you shouldn't need a paid contract to be able to verify if this works in your repo or with your languages or not.
I work with a lot of like college students and military spouses, like learning how to code and kind of like learning how to get into tech. And I wonder if scorecards would be like a nice way to teach them about like securing their GitHub repos, because I'm teaching like Git classes. But I also wonder if like, are there any like pathways for like college kids to get involved in like OpenSSF or like any other open source organizations that you're like?
Oh, there absolutely are. And so there's so many projects and so much work to be done. And so, yeah, I'd encourage people to go and take a look there. There's new stuff happening on an almost daily basis. And of course, an awful lot of toil behind it, which needs many hands to get to the work there. The other thing this gets you to is when you're doing this in your own repos, and especially if you've got multiple ones, as you're moving forward from that, you want to have good quality templates that just have everything done already, but also you want to have repeatable config. Autumn, you were saying earlier, I want to get into Terraform. It's like, that's your hook to get into Terraform, because you can use Terraform to have consistent good config across all of your GitHub repos.
And that's a general rule for most like a lot of things start as toil. We do them manually, we figure out the pattern, and then we make a template from it, and then we do the template over and over again, and then we automate the template, and then we abstract the template, right? Like that's the like general like flow for anything in infrastructure and software. It's just like, hey, we figured out the hard way to do it, we figured out an easier way that was repeatable, and then we're just like, now we don't even think about it anymore. And at some point, hopefully some of this stuff just becomes abstracted away. We're like, hey, this is just the defaults. Like if you don't do this, it'd be surprising, right? Like that 8 score is not something you have to achieve anymore. If you drop below an 8, like you probably did something very wrong. And we need to figure out how to get everyone to that level 8 of like best practices are just best practices, and everything is defaulting to that. And so I think that's a really cool long-term.
Safe defaults. This is normal.
But it's also teaching you best practices in the, while you go through it. So it's also like a great learning opportunity at the same time. So it's even better, Especially
right now as it's changing.
That's what I'm saying. So much has happened in infrastructure in the last 4 years. Like it's wild how far we've come, like, so getting better best practices and better ways to set up your next project. I mean, there's definitely like a lot of value in that,
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking to us about OpenSSF Scorecards. And hopefully anyone that's interested wants to reach out to either you or the OpenSSF, they can get involved and try out the tool. Go run it. Like I just ran it during this podcast, and it's super quick and showed me that, I don't have any vulnerabilities in my bash, but I could make some improvements still. And that's kind of the goal of being able to level up everyone on where they can improve for especially areas that like I didn't realize, maybe I need to do some more work in my repos. So thanks, Chris, for coming on, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Chris.
What's up, friends? This episode is brought to you by our friends at Synadia. Synadia is helping teams take NAS to the next level via a global, multi-cloud, multi-geo, and extensible service fully managed by Synadia. They take care of all the infrastructure, management, monitoring, and maintenance for you so you can focus on building exceptional distributed applications. And I'm here with VP of Product and Engineering, Byron Ruth. So Byron, in the Nats versus Kafka conversation, I hear a couple different things. One, I hear out there, I hate Kafka with a passion. That's quoted, by the way, on Hacker News. I hear Kafka is dead, long live Kafka. And then I hear Kafka is the default, but I hate it. So what's the deal with Nats versus Kafka?
Yeah, so Kafka is an interesting one. I've personally followed Kafka for quite some time, ever since the LinkedIn days. And I think what they've done in terms of transitioning the landscape to event streaming has been wonderful. I think they definitely were the sort of first to market for persistent data streaming. However, over time, as people have adopted it, they were the first to market. They provided a solution, but you don't know what you don't know in terms of you need this solution, you need this capability, but inevitably there's also all this operational pain and overhead that people have come to associate with Kafka deployments. Based on our experience and what users and customers have come to us with, they would say we are spending a ton of money on a team to maintain our Kafka clusters or, managed services or something like that. The paradigm of how they model topics and how you partition topics and how you scale them is not really in line with what they fundamentally want to do. And that's where Nats can provide, as we refer to it, subject-based addressing, which has a much more granular way of addressing messages, sending messages, subscribing to messages and things like that, which is very different from what Kafka does. And the second that we introduced persistence with our Jetstream subsystem, as we refer to it, a handful of years ago, we literally had a flood of people saying, can I replace my Kafka deployments with this Nats Jetstream alternative? And we've been getting constant inbounds, constant customers asking, hey, can you enlighten us with what Nats can do? And oh, by the way, here's all these other dependencies like Redis and other things, and some of our services-based things that we could potentially migrate and evolve over time by adopting Nats as a technology, as a core technology to people's systems and platforms. So this has been largely organic. We never, from day one, with our persistence layer Jetstream, the intention was never to say, we're going to go after Kafka. But because of how we layered the persistence on top of this really nice pub sub core Nats foundation, and then we promoted it and we say, hey, now we have the same semantics, same paradigm with these new primitives that introduce persistence in terms of streams and consumers. The floodgate just opened and everyone was frankly coming to us and wanting to simplify their architecture, reduce costs, operational costs, get all of these other advantages that Nats has to offer that Kafka does not whatsoever, or any of the other similar offerings out there. And you get all these other advantages that Nats has to offer.
So there's someone out there listening to this right now. They're the Kafka cluster admin, the person in charge of this cluster going down or not. They manage the team, they feel the pain, all the things. Give a prescription. What should they do?
What we always recommend is that you can go to the Nats website, download the server, look at the client and model a stream. There's some guides on doing that. We also have Synadia provided basically a packet of resources to inform people, because we get, again, so many inbound requests about how do you compare Nats and Kafka? And we're like, let's actually just put a thing together that can inform people how to compare and contrast them. So we have a link on the website that we can share, and you can basically go get those set of resources. This includes a very lengthy white paper from an outside consultant that did performance benchmarks and stuff like that, and discuss basically the different trade-offs that are made. And they also do a total cost of ownership assessment between people who are organizations running Kafka versus running Nats for comparable workloads.
Well, there you go. You have a prescription. Check for a link in the show notes to those resources. Yesterday's tech is not cutting it. Nats, powered by the global multi-cloud, multi-geo, and extensible service that is fully managed by Synadia. It's the way of the future. Learn more at synadia.com/changelog. That's SYNADIA.com/changelog.
All right, I thought that was a great interview with Chris. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us all about OpenSSF Scorecards. For today's outro of Ship It, I've been making new outro segments every time, and I went into a rabbit hole last week of how things got named.
I just want you to know that I love your rabbit holes, and when you get excited about stuff, it makes me so happy.
I started reading a blog post, and then I read comments, and then I started on Wikipedia, and I went on more Wikipedia links than I have in a long time. That Wikipedia hole was deep. And
this is why we're the best ADHD friends.
So at some point I just started writing notes, and I'm like, okay, what does this mean? And then I'm like, okay, this is a game. We're going to play a game, Autumn, and you're going to be the contestant because I have all the answers.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And this game is called Person, Place, Thing, or Null. And we are going to talk about different technologies, and you can decide.
That you came up with a cool name too. Like, I'm so proud of you.
You have to decide if this technology was named after a person, place, thing, or just made up. It wasn't any of those things, or it was like another word or term or something like that. Like null's like a catch-all.
I'm suck at this game, but like I'm here for it.
It's fun. So let's talk about, like, just for an example, like Linux, the operating system, that was named after Linus Torvalds. Right? Like he created it and he named it. Do you know where the name of Git comes from?
I don't remember. No.
It also comes from Linus. He created it. And it means like a stupid person in British, like a slang for like an idiot.
Shut
and
up.
He said he named it after himself. And so Linus also created Git and then said he named it for himself. So the name Git comes from him for naming it for himself. So it's kind of
Do you think he really named it after himself, or do you think he was like low key throwing shade? Like
whatever the case may be, he claims that he named it after himself, and that's a fun little tidbit there for people. So where does something like the name Kubernetes come from?
I don't know. I'm terrible at Kubernetes.
You want to guess? Person, place, thing, or null?
No.
I guess it would be a thing, but it's Greek for helmsman.
Oh, I love that. I love when they name like services after. Oh, but that makes sense because of the little wheel. That's so cute.
Now you get the logo. There you go.
That's adorable.
And actually, the interesting tidbit as well about Kubernetes and the wheel has 7 points on it because the project name inside of Google was 7 of 9 because they were a big Star Trek. Borg is their internal system.
See, this is why you have to teach me about Star Trek and friggin' Star Wars because like I miss all this stuff.
So that's a fun little tidbit of like why the wheel is the way it is. And it also is like, it's really hard to find a wheel that has 7 points because they're like ridiculous to make. So
why do I feel like you probably tried to find one of these as a prop somewhere?
Maybe not. Yeah. Let's go something that you might be a little more familiar with. MySQL, person, place, thing, or null.
Place or no, like thing?
It's a person. The person's name is Widenius, who created it, or at least named it. And so they actually named it MySQL, like their name, SQL, and My is actually their first name.
I was thinking sequel would be something, not the like My, so that's cool.
I know, and that was the first time I was just like, I had no idea, and this is cool. And so that's where I started down this route. And so here's what we were talking about before the show recording. Venn diagram, person, place, thing, or null.
I still I really want you to make like a Venn diagram of nerds because like I feel like that could be a whole show, but like, okay. I feel like it was named after a person.
It was John Venn. John Venn is the person that a Venn diagram is named after. The person who created Venn diagrams. This is I didn't get all the links out of it. I just wrote down.
Okay, but also like, do you just wonder like how he was sitting there thinking about Venn diagrams one day?
I wonder what train of thought led him down that path. How about a Trojan horse?
Isn't Trojan named after the city that did it?
Exactly. It's a place. Yes. It's named after Troy where it happened. So a Trojan horse as a virus or something in your system is named after Troy as the city. How about Bluetooth?
Thing? Maybe.
It's a person.
Really?
Harold Bluetooth was a king of Denmark.
Okay, there's some like people with some very like interesting names.
Yes. It turns out names are very interesting. What about neon?
Let's just say person because I don't think it's person.
It was from the Greek word for new.
We are a bunch of nerds in tech, huh? I love Greek, like mythology and like Greek, all of that. So like every time there's like a random service named after it, it makes me so excited.
I'm going to do a couple more. These are fun. And like I have such a big list right now. Okay, wait, this one surprised me. Person, place, thing, or null. Algorithms.
Person.
Yes. Al-Khwarizmi. I'm sorry. The name is, I cannot. I'm just too white. But he was a Persian mathematician.
Ridiculous.
He was I'm trying. I literally was I was reading it like over and over again in my head. Like, I'm going to pronounce it right now.
I can read things in my head until like it's time for me to actually say it out loud. And then I'm like, oh my.
Like, I can't. He was a Persian mathematician. So algebra was also named for him. But algorithms, he had a couple big books about math from a long time ago. And so algorithms are named after
It's
him.
interesting because I always wondered if algo was like, you know how they like biology and then ology and then they're like the science of. I always wondered if there was like not abbreviation, but what would you call it? Like sort of like algo meant like something like scientific or mathematic.
Oh yeah. All right, let's do 2 more. Hadoop. Person, place, thing, or null. Hadoop.
Person?
A thing. It was named after the inventor's, one of his kids had a toy elephant that was named Hadoop. And it was his name. And so he named this
That's adorable
thing after his kid's elephant toy.
Oh, that's cute.
Okay, last one. Debian. Debian, the Linux distro.
Thing.
Person. But actually 2 people named Deb and Ian.
Oh, that's cool.
So they have Debian. And a fun fact about Debian is all of their releases are named after Toy Story characters. And so you have, so if you ever use Jessie or all of their normal releases are named after characters. And then,
Do you ever hear something about someone and you're just like, I'd totally be their friend? Like,
yes, we are immediate friends.
Yes.
I don't know you, but we are friends. The unstable release of Debian is called Sid, for the neighbor that blows up toys. And
oh my God. Okay. Tell me how my kids could watch Nightmare Before Christmas and every creepy, like, like Disney show, but like Sid was where they drew the line. They were like, this dude, no. Like, it took them years to watch like Toy Story. And I'm like, that's not even a scary show. And he's like, did you see what they did to the doll?
if you watch it now, the animation was so crude that it actually like looks a little more scary to me, where I was like, oh my gosh, like it's like Uncanny Valley sort of scary, because we look at what animation is now and we're just like, oh, like that dog doesn't have fur. It's like a weird texture thing. And it's not, like there's a lot of things that I'm like, actually this scares me. I get this. So if anyone has other names for things, please send them, email us, ship it at changelog, because I want to hear more of them. I have a list now, and we could redo this as a segment if we get more names,
or post them in the comments. That'd be cool too. We could reply to the comments.
Yes, that's true. Leave a comment, whatever. If you also have people that you would like to hear on the show, topics you'd like to hear on the show, go ahead and please email us, ship it at changelog, because we have a collection of people we're talking to.
What's like your dream interviews? Like, I feel like we need more space people.
More space people, yeah. Who do people want on the show? Like, who would be like the number one? I want to hear what this infrastructure.
Like, what kind of industries would you like? Like, what is like your jam? What would be like your top industries that you really want to know more about?
I love embedded systems. I like hardware, and I would love to hear, like, the space episode was really cool just because it was like something far, far away. But also like other systems like that are in environments where like nothing should exist, like things deep sea, things in the desert, things that were just like, you know what, like, yeah, this has to exist for 5 years with no one ever touching it. And it has to, like, the systems that collects earthquakes, right? Like, how are those maintained? Where do they run? I
love like processes and like thinking about the like unique problems, because those are such unique problems that you have to solve for, but like they're abstract in a way, but they're also like very like visual and like a physical, like you can think of like, okay, this is going to be somewhere and it's going to have this problem. And I just love the fact of like you have to solve for those physical things, but like with also with software, so like they're satellites, but they're going to be in space, but then also like I just think that's so cool. Like I
have always loved when software interacts with the physical world, when bits and atoms, they get together and they're like, we're doing something together. And it's just like, I wrote something down and it made the first time that I loved software is when I made an LED turn on. I'm like, I typed something in a computer and that light lit up.
Yes. That's why I love like IoT and like that kind of stuff, because it's like, it's that bridge between like you get an ID and you make a bunch of stuff out of thin air and then it affects the real world. And that is just like,
and electricity moves because I told it to, and that's just like,
it's like real magic in real life. Like you grow up all like thinking about like Harry Potter and like all these magical things. And then all of a sudden it's like software magic in real life. Like when the first time your kid like runs something in a like code editor and like they see it work and you're just like, yes, we've got them. Like,
robotics is really fun, and there's a lot of things like that where it's just like I love how those things get together, and you're just like the words I wrote over here.
I'm going to pay my like life savings for my kid to go to robotics camp, mostly because I couldn't afford stuff like that like when I was little. And I'm like so jelly, dude. Like, why don't we have this for adults? Like
an adult space camp would be amazing.
Oh my god, we have to start a space camp.
Oh. Autumn, I have too many things going on. I'm not doing a space
I
camp.
know.
Sorry.
We don't have enough hours in the day already. But like, okay, but hear me out. The space camp would be so much fun. Can you imagine me and you and a bunch of our nerd friends at like our space camp? Like, that's it. We have to call Andrew and be like, Andrew, we've got a plan. We have an idea. Like
All right, thanks everyone for listening to the show. One last thing is the day you hear this, hopefully is not too late, but March 14th through 17th, Autumn and I are both going to be at the Southern California Linux Expo, Scale, in Pasadena, California. So if you are coming to Scale and want to say hi, Autumn and I are both giving talks there. We're going to be around it goes over the weekend. It's a great family friendly event. If you have kids, or they have a game night on Saturday nights, they actually have like a nerd Olympics this year.
Oh,
I was reading their emails.
I'm so excited.
There's a lot of fun things going on. And if you're at Scale and want to say hi, please feel free to stop us. Yeah, we'd love to meet you in person.
We should record a Scale episode.
Where I'm trying to think of how we would do that and if we want to do interviews for it. So we might have a
Scale. That'd be so much fun.
Yeah. A Scale episode, but also I'm one of the organizers for Scale and Kubernetes Community Day, so I have a lot of other things to do, so we'll have to figure out how that fits in.
Stop having 5 jobs, Justin. We have to do fun nerd stuff.
That is fun nerd stuff. I get to volunteer for a Linux expo, and that's cool.
That's cool.
The eye roll on that was.
But we have to have like interviews too.
Well, I'll send you a microphone out and you can go start meeting all the cool people and just recording.
Also, we should go into the like nerd Olympics. Oh my god, we can be a team. It'll be so much fun.
If you want to compete with us, I'm sorry, you will not get golds. We will win these events. Do you think the nerd Olympics are going to have physical requirements?
I don't know. Like the possibilities. Like I'm super excited. Like it could go either way. You know? Just like I'm just excited to see what it is at this point.
I don't remember all of the events, but I remember one of them was like a paper airplane contest, like who can throw the paper airplane the farthest.
Okay, I'm like bomb at that. I got 3 kids. Like I can do that.
There you go. One of them was rebuild a Lego model without the instructions, but like the Lego model's across the room. So like you have to go like run, look at it, go run to your table and like build as fast as you can. And if you need to see again, you got to go run back.
Oh my God. The kid that's never been that great at sports. Like this is me right here. Okay. Like this is like, I finally like found my jam of Olympics. Like
the game night at Scale is pretty epic. So if you've never been to Southern California Linux Expo before, highly recommend it. I've been going for...
I feel like I'm going to the conference of my people and I'm like so excited. Like
it is my favorite conference to go to every year. And it's fun. It's in Pasadena.
I'm so excited to meet you in real life. We're going to be like nerd friends in real life together. It's going to be so awesome.
It is going to be a good time. But yeah, if you are listening to the show and want to say hi, please stop us and do so, because we don't know your face, and hopefully you at least hear our voice. If you have to see my face, I'm sorry.
I'll be the girl with way too many tech t-shirts and pink hair. It's going to be great.
Hopefully people will find you with that. But also, come to your talk and learn all about AI and data.
I both want them to come and want them not to come because I'm really nervous. It's going to be great, though.
Yes, it is going to be great. So thanks, everyone, for listening, and we will be speaking at you next week. Thanks for joining, and hopefully see you soon.
3, 2, 1. This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at fly.io.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.